Gaslit is an American political thriller television limited series based on the first season of the podcast Slow Burn by Leon Neyfakh. It stars Julia Roberts, Sean Penn, Dan Stevens, Betty Gilpin, Shea Whigham, and Darby Camp. It premiered on Starz on April 24th, 2022. Gaslit begins in early 1972 and follows the story of the Watergate scandal through the lives of several individuals on its periphery. Nixon, for example, is rarely seen, while the main protagonist is Martha Mitchell, known as the Mouth from the South, due to a propensity to talk to the press, often at inopportune times for her husband, John Mitchell. He opens the series as Nixon's Attorney General. She is aware that her behavior makes her more unpopular with the government and her husband, and on one occasion telling the latter to get another wife if you want a silent one. Seen as a liability by both, she eventually blows the whistle on Nixon's knowledge of the activities of his staff. Other perspectives come from the burglary's coordinator, G. George Liddy, who leads a gang of ex-FBI agents and Cuban exiles. He's also presented as a Nazi sympathizer, an Apocalypse Now-style menace, a sage-spouting nonsense who likes to hold his hand over a burning flame, who presents the White House with a grand plan for the wholesale infiltration of the Democratic Party. John Dean, junior counsel, is first pleased to be chosen by the president himself for the position, but becomes increasingly unnerved at the extent of the administration's involvement in criminality, until he realizes he's being set up as the fall guy. His personal life is also complicated by his engagement and subsequent marriage to a political left-wing activist, Mo Dean. The Daily Telegraph summarized Gaslit as focusing on the Watergate characters who were right at the center of the scandal but have faded from public memory. Similarly, The Hollywood Reporter identified the series as refocusing the events of 72 to 75 away from the white men in positions of political power to the white wives, a black security guard, and Italian and Hispanic FBI field agents. The cast includes Julia Roberts as Martha Mitchell. Martha Mitchell, who died on May 31, 1976 at just the age of 57, was the wife of John N. Mitchell, a United States Attorney General under President Richard Nixon. Her public comments and interviews during the Watergate scandal were frank and revealing. The phrase, the Martha Mitchell effect, in which a psychiatrist mistakenly or willingly identifies a patient's true but extraordinary claims as delusions, was named after her. Sean Penn as John M. Mitchell. Mitchell was the 67th Attorney General of the United States under President Richard Nixon and chairman of Nixon's 1968 and 1972 presidential campaigns. Prior to that, he had been a municipal bond lawyer and one of Nixon's closest personal friends. He was tried and convicted as a result of his involvement in the Watergate scandal, where he served 19 months. Dan Stevens as John Dean. Dean is an American former attorney who served as the White House counsel for the U.S. President Richard Nixon from July 1970 until April of 73. Dean is known for his role in the cover-up of the Watergate scandal and his subsequent testimony to Congress as a witness. His guilty plea to a single felony in exchange for becoming a key witness for the prosecution ultimately resulted in a reduced sentence, which he served at Fort Hollywood outside Baltimore, Maryland. After his plea, he was disbarred. Betty Gilpin as Maureen Dean, better known as Mo, who is the wife of John Dean, and also a writer, known for Blind Ambition in 1979 and The Mike Douglas Show in 1961. The two married on the 13th of October 1972, Shea Whigham as G. Gordon Liddy. Liddy was an American lawyer, FBI agent, talk show host, actor, and convicted felon in the Watergate scandal as the chief operative in the White House Plumbers Unit during the Nixon administration. Liddy was convicted of conspiracy, burglary, and illegal wiretapping for his role in the scandal. Working alongside E. Howard Hunt, Liddy organized and directed the burglary of the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate building in May and June 1972. After 5 of Liddy's operatives were arrested inside the DNC offices on June 17, 1972, subsequent investigations of the Watergate scandal led to Nixon's resignation in 1974. Liddy was convicted of burglary, conspiracy, and refusing to testify to the Senate committee investigating Watergate. He served nearly 52 months in federal prisons. And Darby Camp as Marty Mitchell, John and Martha's daughter. Some trivia notes. For Sean Penn's transformation into John Mitchell, a team incorporated 11 prosthetics into a routine that took about 3.5 hours each day, plus a bodysuit to change his frame. Originally, Armie Hammer and Joel Edgerton were originally cast in the leading roles, but both had to drop out. Hammer dropped out due to his public scandal regarding rape allegations, and he was later replaced by Dan Stevens, and Edgerton dropped out due to scheduling conflicts, and he was later replaced by Shea Whigham. Sean Penn at one stage refused to return to the series until all the cast and the crew in production had COVID-19 vaccine. In September, the studio and Penn reached a compromise where Penn would film his scenes in 2 weeks with the vaccinated production crew. In an interview, director Robbie Pickering said that the series was not a girl boss overcorrected of history. or a Wikipedia rundown, but that their goal was to accurately depict the historical events. Dan Stevens later commented, anyone can go and read a book about this or Wikipedia entry, but they are human stories that illustrate the depth of what really happened. Just a quick overview on the Watergate scandal. The scandal was a major political scandal in the United States involving the administration of President Richard Nixon from 72 to 74 that led to Nixon's resignation. The scandal stemmed from Nixon's administration's persistent attempts to cover up its involvement in the June 17, 1972 break-in of the Democratic National Committee headquarters in Washington, D.C. at the Watergate office building. After the 5 perpetrators were arrested, the press and the Department of Justice connected the cash found on them at the time to the Committee for Re-election of the President. Later, recordings were found via a voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office. The Nixon White House tapes revealed that he conspired to cover up activities that took place after the break-in, and that later he tried to use federal officials to deflect attention from the investigation. The House Judiciary Committee approved 3 articles of impeachment against Nixon for obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. With his complicity in the cover-up made public and his political support completely eroded, Nixon resigned from office on August 9, 1974. It is generally believed that if he had not done so, he would have been impeached by the House and removed from office by a trial in the Senate. There were 69 people indicted, of which 48 people, many of them top Nixon administration officials, were convicted. Through Watergate, it was found that a lot of illegal activities undertaken by members of Nixon's administration, including bugging of officers of political opponents and people of whom Nixon or his officials were suspicious, ordering investigations of activist groups and political figures, and using the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the CIA and the Internal Revenue Service as political weapons. The use of the suffix "gate" after an identifying term has since become synonymous with public scandal, especially political scandal. Now, I found this to be an absolutely thought-provoking, entrancing and engaging television series that I couldn't wait to see what happened next. Even though you know the true history of what really happened at the Watergate scandal, this show really goes behind the whole scandal, and it delves into the personalities and the people who really were involved in this whole mess-up. What I also like about the show is it doesn't really portray Nixon in any light. We've seen plenty of shows that talk about Nixon himself, but this now talks about the characters and people around him, rather. For example, a person like Martha Mitchell has almost been forgotten within history. Martha was a fascinating yet complicated lady who spoke out to what she believed in and wanted to speak the truth, but at the cost of her marriage and at a relationship with her daughter. Unfortunately, Martha had a huge drinking and drug problem, and in many ways she was left to die on the vine in a cruel and uncaring system. Julia Roberts brings Martha to life with an absolute perfect performance. She plays her as a loudmouth Southern belle who won't let any man tell her what to do, but in the same breath, it really does cost her so much. Sean Penn is absolutely mesmerizing here as John M. Mitchell, and Penn is almost unrecognizable here in all the prosthetic makeup. The way he, of course, smokes the pipe the whole time, he just brings a sort of gravitas to every single scene that he's in, and an intensity as well, and you can't wait to see what he'll do next. I also enjoyed Dan Stevens here as the naive John Dean, who's trying too hard to be one of the favorites and be chosen by the president, as it were. But of course, eventually, he realizes he wants to do what's right. I thoroughly enjoyed the chemistry here between Dan Stevens and Betty Gilpin as Mo Dean. I just loved the way their story was told, the way they first met, how they kept breaking away from each other, then found one another again, and then learned to actually love one another as well. It's just a nice little side tale within the whole bigger story. Shea Whigham also turns out an excellent, mesmerizing and yet very scary performance here as G. Gordon Liddy. The one episode where particularly you focus on him in his prison cell was quite unnerving and rather eerie and maybe a bit too prolonged, but in the same breath got the message across. All the cast are absolutely superb in the show, and you can really see this was a passion project for a lot of them. The sets and the costumes are absolutely stunning, and the attention to detail in the era it was set is absolutely perfect. And even though, like I said, this is a very well-known story within history, it's wonderful now to dive into some of the huge personalities and characters behind the whole scandal, like, for example, Martha Mitchell. What this show speaks to, of course, is the larger corruption and power greed within American politics. How everybody will do whatever it takes to get one step ahead and will sell each other under the bus and stab each other in the back. It shows the ruthlessness and the ease of lying and telling false truths to get one step ahead. It's a fascinating insight into not only the Nixon administration, but maybe politics as a whole. From its fantastic acting performances, attention to detail to the script, and bringing to light some of the characters maybe forgotten from this most historic of scandals, Gaslit gets a 9.5 out of 10.